All right, hello everybody. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Gina. I am a tattoo artist in Portland, Oregon. And today we are revisiting a topic I brought up in some of my short form videos, roses in art and tattoo history. So in those short form videos, I had to edit out a lot of really fun information because I was trying to keep them short. But I really want to share more about what I found when I was doing my research. And I like to be thorough, and honestly, it's all really fascinating information, so I really don't want to leave a whole lot out. And before we get started, please remember that I am just one guy. It takes a lot of time and effort for me to make these videos. So it really does help if you like or follow and subscribe and leave a comment saying what you liked about the video, if you learned anything new, or what subject you would like me to touch on next. I will be staring off in this direction because this is where all of my notes on my screen are, and I cannot possibly memorize all of this and recite it while staring at the camera. Let's get on to the point. So nobody is too cool for rose tattoos. I reckon there's not a single tattooer out there that hasn't drawn at least 500 roses over the years. I would guess even that most moderately tattooed people probably have at least one tattoo of a rose on their bodies. Roses are very likely the most popular floral motif in both art and tattoo designs and have been for thousands of years. I think the only other tattoo design more popular would probably be dots and lines, as those are the fundamentals for indigenous tattoos around the world since Neolithic pre-literate civilization. That is for another video though. Now, about roses. They are old as heck. They were cultivated in China as early as 2700 BCE, and then by the Sumerians roughly around the same time. Most of the Western world gets their roses from the Sumerian region, but ancient tablets from the royal tombs of Ur in Chaldea report that the Sumerian king Sargon I brought back vines, figs, and rose trees to his country from a military campaign in the east. Chinese ancestors had a profound respect for nature and a deep affection for plants. Known globally as the Mother of Gardens, China was and still is very well known for rose gardens and delicate floral cultivation. And that is probably because roses were in China before people ever were. That is the origin story for the genus Rosa. Fossils from Fushun, Liaoning in northern China date back to 40 million years ago during the Eocene epoch. This is after the mass extinction of dinosaurs and during some rapid shifts in mammalian evolution and paleogeography, but before the time of Homo sapiens. Over in the Middle East, in Persia, or modern-day Iran, roses were highly valued for their uses in perfume and medicine and much, much more. I mentioned earlier that Sumeria is one of the first places of rose cultivation. So Sumerian civilization was in southern Mesopotamia, which is modern-day southern Iraq, between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers near the Persian Gulf. And Persians emerged later, originating from Central Asia and settling the Fars region, which is modern Iran. They used roses in everything and spread them like wildfire across all of their trade routes. And this is where all of the Egyptians and Romans and Greeks were getting their roses from. Now that we've covered rose history and where they come from and early cultivation, let's get into recorded art history. The oldest known painting of a rose is a fresco from Knossos on the island of Crete around 1500 BCE. It is a tiny, charming painting of a wild rose with a little bird next to it. So fresco is Italian for fresh, and a fresco painting is an ancient technique where artists would mix pigments into wet lime plaster. As the plaster on the wall dries, the painting becomes an integral part of the wall. Frescoes are the most popular forms of painting in antiquity and can last for a millennia. Several frescoes have been found in Egyptian tombs and archaeological sites from Minoan, Greek, and Roman cultures. Many have even survived the thick layer of volcanic ash that Vesuvius left on Pompeii. I will pull up some examples of the Pompeian frescoes right here. Aren't they nice? So roses were a very, very popular design element in many frescoes in the region. Let's get into why they were so popular. First of all, the rose is an incredible flower in the pantheon. Ancient Greeks and Romans associated roses with Aphrodite, Eros, Dionysus, all of the messy, emotional, chaotic deities with representations of love, passion, and beauty. One myth declares that the red rose was born when Aphrodite ran to her dying lover Adonis after he was brutally gored by a wild boar, and when her falling tears mixed with his red blood on the ground, roses sprouted from the puddle. Tragic, dramatic, and very on brand for Greek mythology. To make the drama spicier, some say that the wild boar was actually Ares in disguise, Aphrodite's jealous lover. Other myths claim that the boar was sent by Athena, goddess of the hunt, because Adonis had trespassed into her territory. But I don't think Athena was that petty. I do, however, think Ares was for sure very petty. However, super dramatic romance wasn't the only association for roses in antiquity. In Hellenistic and later Roman mythology, they represented secrecy and confidence. Cupid gave a rose to Harpocrates, the god of silence, so that he wouldn't reveal Venus's secrets. And because of that, wealthy Romans started decorating banquet halls with rosettes to remind guests what's said in there stays in there. This is where the Latin phrase sub rosa, meaning under the rose, originates. Later on, Christians adopted this association and adorned Catholic confessionals with carvings of roses. Roses were such a beloved flower at this time that the ancient Romans would have a Floralia festival at the beginning of the rose harvest. People would celebrate with the flower, wear garlands and wreaths made from it, and visit the tombs and burial sites of the dead to honor them with gifts and displays of roses. They even followed this with a celebration for their military with more roses in a festival called Rosalia Signorum. Legend has it that the Roman Emperor Heliogabalus, please forgive me if I mispronounce his name, I am not quite sure how to say that. Legend has it that Roman Emperor Heliogabalus, during a banquet, released so many rose petals from a hidden compartment in the ceiling that he buried his guests, with some even suffocating to death, all the while he carried on celebrating, unconcerned for his guests who were literally dying in front of him. So many historians believe this to be a huge exaggeration of the event, or even a completely falsified rumor spread by political rivals. But whatever the actual circumstances were, it has remained a famous story of Roman roses nonetheless. So roses were so valued in Rome that during the off-season, they would even drain their own resources, importing roses from the east, according to the poet Virgil. The Romans even became so obsessed with the flower that they eventually turned over farmland to produce more roses, causing shortages in local food production. They were obsessed. But enough about those fiending Romans. Let's voyage south to ancient Egypt, where roses were tied to Isis. Egyptians believed roses had protective and magical properties, especially around themes of rebirth and the afterlife. They often appeared in funerary art and are believed to have sometimes been used in burial rituals to guide or protect the soul on their journey to the next world. They would primarily work with Rosa gallica and Rosa damascena. The Damascus rose, which likely originated from trade with Syria and Mesopotamia, was particularly prized for its potent fragrance. The advanced irrigation systems already in place helped Egyptians cultivate rose gardens, and soon they were able to make hybrids of different species for specific characteristics. Roses were also, like in most cultures, related to love and beauty, and thusly associated with the goddess Hathor. It is said that Cleopatra famously covered her bedchamber with rose oils and petals so that she would always smell of roses, especially during her romance with Mark Antony. So let's fast forward to the European Middle Ages, where Christianity had adopted roses into their own religion. Praying with a rosary has its origins in rose garlands, and they even had colorful associations. White roses would symbolize purity, immaculate conception, and faith, and were associated with the Virgin Mary, aka the rose without a thorn. And red roses symbolized the spilled blood of Christ, divine love, and the sacrifices of martyrs. And these colors were also used in the War of Roses, a century-long English civil war. At this time, England is ravaged with famine and plagues and excruciatingly cold winters that were devastating the population, leading to war and revolt. The House of Lancaster, symbolized by a red rose, was beefing with the House of York, symbolized by the white rose. So these houses were disputing their claim to the English throne, which led to decades of brutality and thousands slaughtered. It all came to an end when Henry Tudor, a Lancaster, defeated King Richard III in 1485. He then married Elizabeth of York and united the feuding houses. This is the beginning of the Tudor dynasty and the birth of the new red and white Tudor rose. That doesn't really have anything to do with tattoos or art, it's just a fun little story. Europeans in the Middle Ages loved symbolism, and roses, already soaked in symbolism from all over the world, meant that they were the reigning flower and therefore appeared in all of the art. Renaissance painters took to roses like flies to shit. Look at this. Look at all of this. Roses everywhere. In more Protestant circles, such as 17th century Dutch painters, roses were frequently used in still lifes to show the contrast between beauty and impermanence. If I continue on with roses in art history, there will never be an end to this video, so I need to pivot to the tattoo side of things. Some folks point to Persia as one of the earliest places where rose imagery appeared in tattooing. Allegedly, soldiers would tattoo roses on themselves as reminders of home and the people they loved, though concrete archaeological evidence tying rose motifs specifically to ancient Persian tattoos is sparse and part of ongoing scholarly debate. This contradicts evidence that Persians primarily used tattoos as punishment, which was heavily documented, and where the Greeks got their ideas to start using tattoos penally. That is also a story for another video. We don't actually know who the first person to don a tattoo of a rose is or where they came from. Maybe it's Persia, maybe not. Now, sailors are where rose tattoos start to become clearly documented in the West. By the 18th and 19th centuries, long sea voyages, whaling, and global trade spread tattooing among sailors and into port cities. Sailors would get tattoos as souvenirs of ports, as markers of identity, and as talismans, and roses, being shorthand for home, love, and memory, naturally turned up on a lot of those tattoos. Tattoo flash sheets developed out of that culture and helped standardize motifs like the rose. A rose with a name banner then was pretty much a sailor's equivalent to today's Facebook relationship status. One particular development in wartime tattoo culture is the Rose of No Man's Land, which depicts a rose with a nurse. The image comes from popular cultural references to nurses as roses of the battlefield, and it therefore turned into a common memorial and tribute tattoo among service members and veterans. So if you want to talk about the visual look that people instantly recognize when they think of a classic rose tattoo, we've got to talk about Norman sailor Jerry Collins. Former sailor turned tattooer, he created the blueprint for the American traditional rose. When you think of a classic rose tattoo, you are thinking of the Sailor Jerry rose. So early traditional artists, people like Gus Wagner, Sailor Jerry, and others in that pre- and post-war era, helped make the rose a staple of Western tattoo flash. Because the rose was already loaded with symbolic meaning, such as love, secrecy, memory, martyrdom, beauty versus mortality, etc., etc., it was the perfect flash material. Instantly readable, emotionally resonant, and extremely adaptable. Roses have been a big deal in Chinese culture and art for millennia already. A lot of today's Eastern tattoos of roses borrow a lot from Western style execution. In Japanese irizumi, for example, roses really aren't super common. A quick Google image search of Japanese rose tattoos really just shows a lot of Western roses slapped on top of traditional Japanese tattoos. Sure, they had roses, but Japan has an abundance of florals, and they're more focused on flowers with significance in their own culture, like chrysanthemums, peonies, and cherry blossoms, which are all very intertwined with indigenous legends and folklore. So even though roses are Eastern by origin, they just didn't really pop up a lot in the tattoo cultures. As tattoo styles proliferated, the rose kept morphing. American traditional stayed stylized and bold. In neo-traditional, it got a little bit more detail and with more color depth. In realism, it became the source of botanical studies, more delicate and shaded. Why do roses keep sticking around as a tattoo motif? Outside of the centuries of symbolism that I already talked about, It's because they're just functionally brilliant as art pieces. They've got the natural Fibonacci spiral structure that reads well at small and large scales. They pair with almost anything: daggers, skulls, portraits, banners, and they are equally at home in black and gray tattoos or in color tattoos. They're compositional candy for tattooers. They're easy to stylize, easy to read, and always evocative. You might end up with more than you intend. For example, I have at least 4 rose tattoos, and none of them have anything to do with each other. I got them all at different times. I didn't even think about the fact that I already had rose tattoos, and I just kept getting them. That's the rose trap. They are so universal that they just kind of sneak up on you. If you're sitting around wanting a tattoo and you don't know what you want, just find an artist whose work you really admire and ask them for a rose tattoo. I, for one, would definitely say that the Queen of Flowers has more than earned her place on skin. You don't even have to have a meaning for a rose tattoo. Just get one because it's gorgeous. And if your judgy Aunt Margaret asks you if it has any meaning, you can just go ahead and list off one of the bazillion reasons that I just mentioned. And for the record, tattoos don't have to have any meaning. You can literally just get a tattoo because you like it. None of my roses have any meaning. I just have them because they make me look really cool. That concludes my rose history video. I absolutely loved info dumping all of this on you, and while this is only a fraction of the history of roses, I do hope that you learned something new. Please let me know if you have any rose tattoos or what you would like me to talk about next, and I will see you in the next video. Toodles!